Studio. Joining us now, also in the studio, Pat Fontaine, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Hospitality and Restaurant Association. Morning, Pat. Thanks for coming in today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We were just talking offline a bit about the challenges in the industry, the restaurant. It didn't really speak specifically about the hospitality industry, although you did share that your family comes from that industry. So, Mississippi is wide open and has been for a while. And certainly from my personal observation, the restaurants seem to be doing well from a traffic perspective, but they all seem to be understaffed. They've all got now hiring help wanted signs posted about their establishments. It is indeed a sign of the times. What are you hearing from your members?
Exactly that. Labor is in a crisis mode right now. Very difficult to find both front of house and back of house staff. Many of our members are operating back of house at 50% of their normal staffing levels, and yet they're achieving sales levels that were pre-pandemic. So they're working a lot harder, a lot of overtime. As a result, many members have cut back on their hours of operation. They're closing one day a week that they normally would be open just to give their staff a needed break. Yeah.
I was sharing with you before we came on the air, I caught an interview with a restaurateur in New Jersey, which is just now getting back to it, but has 18 restaurants across the state. And he was saying, echoing the same sentiment, he said that many of his restaurants, he only has one dishwasher. And he said at one of those restaurants last week, that one dishwasher worked 85 hours washing dishes. And paying dishwashers $25 an hour now. So you can do the math on that. That's about a $52,000 a year salary. And he said, not only am I competing with the federal government, who, of course, has extended, augmented unemployment benefits, and that's causing problems. But I'm competing with the other restaurants now that they're getting back for the very limited amount of talent that is even willing to go to work and available to go to work. So he's kind of getting double whammied. And then, of course, you've got on top of that the increase in the inflation of prices, everything from food material, food ingredients, through the plastics and the all the various accessories that are used in operating a restaurant. It's so they're really getting hit. And the question of this restaurateur was, do you think you can raise your prices to pass it on? He said, I just don't think I can.
Exactly. Prime cost, which are labor and food, have increased. Yeah. And to protect your margins, that's what you have to do. And speaking with the member last week, he does it very carefully, not across the board on his menu. He'll choose certain items and gradually increase so customers are less likely to face that sticker shock, so to speak. But, at some point, the consumer will reach that threshold where I'm not going to pay that much. Yeah. And so that's kind of the danger in doing that. And
that's pretty much what this individual indicated as well, is that he could raise the prices, but that would result in loss of business and less traffic, and so you'd have to kind of see how that works out. Maybe you raise prices and maybe you increase not necessarily your margin percent, but the margin dollars produced, but that is offset and countered by the fact that you're selling less because people won't pay the price. I mean, it's the age-old economic challenge, right, of demand and supply and price. But when the cost of all the inputs is rising, I mean, it really makes it for a tough deal. Do you see this leveling out, easing at some point in the future, and sort of getting back to so-called normal?
Well, that's what we're hopeful for, and with regard to labor, the federal unemployment provision ends in Mississippi June 12th. Right. So we're hopeful that we'll see people return to work. Yeah. I had this conversation as well. Will wages go back to what they were? that remains to be seen. We're also we face a minimum wage and tip credit battle.
Exactly.
In D.C. Indications are that that will take place after midterm elections, but it could. That's just what the National Restaurant Association Government Affairs team has stated.
And that would really hurt a lot of restaurants.
Right, and the tip credit especially.
Yeah.
That would be devastating to our restaurants here in Mississippi.
Especially if that's coupled and combined with an increase in the minimum wage.
Exactly.
That would explain that for the benefit of our audience, the tip credit.
Is the tipped employee wage, which at this time is $2.13 an hour.
Right.
Of course, an employee is guaranteed minimum wage, but tips received make up the difference in that $2.13 and minimum wage.
Yep.
Tipped employees do not want to see that system go away. They are making well over minimum wage, and so they like that. Yeah.
Well, and the risk is, of course, if that is eliminated and the minimum wage is raised, then likely prices go up. You get less traffic. People maybe aren't as generous with their tipping. I mean, it's all those things kind of domino out of that.
Yes.
And so they end up probably making less money, is what would likely happen.
Right.
So it's bad policy, and so I assume your organization and the national organization is advocating against that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We are affiliated with the National Restaurant Association.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think, unfortunately, policymakers that sign on to this stuff think they're doing that support this kind of policy, think they're actually helping when they're in reality they're hurting. And I don't know how many of them have actually dug in and talked to people in the field, down at that level. Which would you rather have? So hopefully that'll happen. The prices we were talking about, the price of food, besides labor, but food as an input in the ingredients to prepare meals in a restaurant, and then the various supplies that I was talking about. I couldn't believe how much plastic has gone up, styrofoam stuff.
Exactly, because of the demand with curbside pickup and delivery.
Sure. So that's a big cost.
It always has been. The disposable containers, plasticware, yes, that's always been a costly item, and now much more costly.
Yeah, I saw an interview yesterday with a restaurant owner talking about that specifically, and was showing just the typical plastic kind of main dish for an entree, and it tripled in price in the last couple of months. Tripled. I mean, you're getting to where that starts getting on up there to approach the price of the food itself.
Right. And I don't think many people realize what profit margins are for a restaurant, and for a full-service restaurant not serving alcohol pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Average profit margins are between 4% and 5%.
Yeah, it's brutally low.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so there's not much wiggle room, and that's why typically what you see in a lot of these restaurants is the owner and the owner's family they're suited up working all the jobs. They fill in everywhere to do whatever you got to do to make it work.
When you walk into a restaurant today, you will see the owner bussing tables.
Yeah, and this particular interview I saw yesterday, what he said is that he's having to spend more time in the back doing all the various tasks back there, whereas typically he's out in the front and he's meeting his patrons and shaking their hands and making sure everything's good and just kind of observing, the flow of service and food, and just gauging everybody's satisfaction, which is what they really should do. That's how they get better, and they know that. So
but they are hands-on today.
It's incredible. It really is. Well, I certainly hope that the elimination of the extended unemployment benefits has an impact, gets everybody back to work.
We are as well.
Yeah. Pat, thanks so much for coming in today. It's been interesting, and God bless all these folks in that industry. They provide a valuable service. They're a big part of our economy, and I know they're working their rears off. Let's hope it all gets back and they make some money at it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Pat Fontaine, Executive Director of Mississippi Hospitality and Restaurant Association.